Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. It is Monday, the 10th day of May, 2021, and this will be the last of the off-season editions. You know, we call it that off-season because it's not hurricane season. Well, it might as well be because we do have a named storm in the Eastern Pacific, but when I do this again, this update, next Monday, it will be basically hurricane season for the East Pacific, and the National Hurricane Center will start doing their tropical weather outlooks on May 15th, which is, of course, coming up this coming Saturday. So the bottom line is that this is the last of the off-season monikers, whatever. So get ready. It's coming. Hurricane season's coming, and with that, we got to prepare. We have to think about preparedness and be ready, because there's a lot of things going on this year. We had a lot of stuff going on last year to distract us, to kind of pull our attention away from seeing what's going on in the tropics. A lot of things going on in our lives externally, and so we need to be thinking about mentally, how do we get ready for hurricane season? And I'm going to offer a little bit of advice for you as we move along here. A lot to talk about, a full docket, as it were. I like that word, docket. All right, so let's get on with it and show you, first of all, just a reminder. This week, starting yesterday through Saturday the 15th, National Hurricane Preparedness Week. And this is a big deal. We want to get everybody ready in whatever capacity that means for you. You know, you could be a college kid that only has a dorm full of stuff, and that's all you got to worry about. Maybe you're attending a university down along the hurricane-prone coastal areas of the U.S., or you could be a family of 4 or 6 or 7, a retired couple, whatever the case may be. Maybe an older person with some special needs. Maybe they have oxygen needs, is going to be living with you, is living with you. You know, someone that is dealing with cancer therapy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in our individual lives, and even though we want this to be on a national scope here, everybody be ready. You know, it's up to you as an individual to make sure that you understand your risks. That's the first thing. Understand your risks. What am I vulnerable to? I live along the coast. I live 100 miles inland. I live 200 miles inland. What am I vulnerable to? What could get me? How could hurricanes affect me physically? Then how can they affect you financially? Fiscally, with an F. You know, that it costs money to evacuate. You might have to get renter's insurance. You may want to look at getting flood insurance. And these are all things you need to be working on now. But at the same time, like I said, there's other things happening. The pandemic is still going on with lots of good news in that department, but we're not out of it yet. You know, we still have stuff with disruptions going on in the supply chain, and the price of everything seems to be going up and up and up. And just now recently, I mean, I never thought I'd be talking about this, but this ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline, and we're seeing that in the news. I mean, if something like that were to happen just before a big ramp up in hurricane activity, and we have a reduction in the supply of gasoline, you need to be thinking ahead. You got me here on this side to help you with keeping you up to date on what's happening, and also my experience. So that being said, my best advice to you as we think about hurricane preparedness for 2021, the biggest thing you need to think about, in my humble opinion, is whether or not you need to evacuate. And if so, exactly how are you going to execute that plan? Who's going to go with you? Where's the pets going to go? What am I going to do with my lizard that lives, my desert landscape lizard? My bearded dragon, or whatever you might have. Okay, your fish. You might have exotic fish. You may have tropical fish. You may have a cat, a dog. You get the idea. You got to think about these things now. And again, I say often that we have the blessing of time with hurricanes, because we know that a season is probably going to be busy or not well in advance now. That's given to us pretty much over the last several years. Really, the last 5 or 6 years, it's advanced a lot. So we know that it's a busy season coming up, more or less. I mean, at least the signals are there. And then we can spot development areas pretty soon, pretty quickly, and give you, hopefully, a few days to prepare. Get out of the way, evacuate, prepare your property. unlike tornadoes, gorilla hailstorms, boy, have those been in the news lately, right? And we'll actually talk about that a little bit towards the end of this discussion. And earthquakes, too, right? So hurricanes give us the gift of advance warning. So evacuation is a huge, huge stress. It's a huge commitment that you need to make as to whether or not you're going to evacuate. If you even have to, look at your own personal situation, assess whether or not you're in a storm surge prone area where water coming in because of the rise in the sea level because of the wind stress on the water, that's storm surge. Are you in an evacuation zone? You know, if you don't have to evacuate, it's actually better for you to stay put, protect your property when it's over, maybe help out your neighbors, especially if you are willing and able and fit to do so. But even if you're not in an evacuation zone because of surge, you still might want to evacuate. You might just want to avoid having to deal with the hurricane altogether. That is fine. But plan ahead, leave early for that evacuation if you're going to do so, and have a re-entry plan, and most of all, have patience when it's all said and done, because a lot of things happen after a hurricane is over. You may not be able to get into an area as quickly as you want to, and that can become very aggravating. So there are some great resources here on the National Hurricane Center homepage. If you're brand new to a coastal area, if you're just watching my video for the first time ever, this is what it's all about. We want you to be ready, be prepared for hurricanes on a national level. I mean, anybody in the country can be impacted, at least from reciprocal effects as they kind of trickle down. You know, we have a hurricane that impacts the Gulf Coast. That can affect gasoline supply all the way up into Seattle, Washington, to Bangor, Maine, and San Diego, California. So we all have to think about this collectively. But of course, mostly our coastal residents and then a couple hundred miles inland, because there are a lot of risks, not just at the coast. You have inland flooding. So here are the wonderful different things they have. Determine your risk. That's the first step. Develop your plan. Get your supplies together, including your medications. Do it now. Get that insurance checkup. This is, for me personally, I would say this is my number 2. Insurance, because, wow. The stories I've heard of people dealing with the aftermath of Michael, now coming up on 3 years. In October, it'll be 3 years since Michael, and I know people that are still waiting and litigating, dealing with that, trying to get a settlement from their insurance company. And then we think about all the hurricanes last year, people going through this. Insurance, there's no one easy way to deal with this. But you got to face that and kind of, get ahead of the curve if you can. Get to know your agent in your local area if possible. Strengthen your home, do whatever you can to do that with storm shutters, preferably not plywood, real storm panels that are rated for different impacts. That's a very good idea. And then, work together with your neighbors. Talk about hurricanes. Don't think of hurricanes as a 4-letter word. People get angry when they hear people talking about hurricanes. They're hyping it up or whatever. BS. Let's all work together, all right? Share your knowledge if you're a weather geek like me. That's why I got into this whole thing, is because I'm a weather geek. Was when I was born, for whatever reason. We can all work together. Share your knowledge. Knowledge is power, seriously. And then get that written plan. I know it sounds like, oh, who's writing down a plan? Use your iPhone or your Android or whatever you got, your tablet, your Google Docs, and make a list of what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, who you're going to take with you if you got to evacuate, pet-wise, medicine-wise, whatever. Where are you all going to meet up? There's a lot involved. So now's the time. It's only May 10th. We don't have any hurricanes out there right now, so you better be ready. All right? And this is a good warning shot, segueing nicely into what's going on in the tropics. Look at this. We have a tropical storm out in the eastern Pacific, the earliest formation on record. I need a soundboard button with like a big round of applause sound effect. The name of it is Andres. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Andres. And it's out in the open there near the Albatross Plateau. Don't you love our tracking map? This is our interactive tracking map that is part of our HurricaneTrack Insider site, available to our patrons that support us through crowdfunding, through Patreon. And this is what that looks like. You can zoom in and get a nice look at what's happening, where it is. And you get all these different place names. The Albatross Plateau, who knew, right? But seriously, it is south and west of mainland Mexico down here. Tropical storm, fairly weak overall. I'll show you a satellite animation in just a moment. Trying to make me go away here so I can draw and talk and not distract myself. And it's going to move on out into the open Pacific even more so and die away over cooler water. And that's about it. Kind of an early development, sort of a fluke thing. I don't believe that it's a sign of some, unbelievable busy season. It's just, records are meant to be broken. And so this one got broken with the earliest development ever, as they would say. All right, I guess if you're up in the Northeast. Anyway, this is what it looks like. You can tell I'm in a good mood today. Things are just, got a lot to talk about and a lot of positive stuff happening. Upper level winds, very nice education here as to what shear is. You see the thunderstorm activity getting blown away from the center of circulation down here. And those upper level winds, too strong, so it kind of whisks away all that deep convection, not allowing it to wrap around that center there and create spiral banding that would bring in that warm, moist air to the core and continue the process. That's being disrupted. One of the ways that these things weaken is upper level winds blowing over the top like that, and that is a great example of that phenomenon. You can also tell just looking at the satellite animation, if you know what you're looking for, that there are cooler water temperatures waiting out here. Just not a lot of deep convection to the west. It's still early. It's only May 10th, so water temps out that way, not real warm to begin with, but just enough so to give us the first tropical storm of the eastern Pacific season. All right, moving along. SOI, the Southern Oscillation Index. Look, it's rebounding just a little bit, the 30-day average. Now, granted, we're only 10 days into the month, but if we compare it to April, we are up a little bit. And we can see that reflected not only in the tabular format here from the numbers, but also a pretty rapid rise right there in the, whoops, brought me back. I was trying to do the highlighter. Right there in the 30-day. The 30 and the 90-day are about to meet up, basically, and become pretty steady. But that's a pretty quick jump there. We were level after sinking for a bit, and then a pretty quick rise. Why does the SOI matter? It helps us to understand the pressure pattern over the tropical Pacific, and as such, the state of the ENSO, or El Nino Southern Oscillation phenomenon. Basically, if we have lower pressure way out in the western Pacific, and higher pressure in the eastern Pacific, marks oversimplification of it, but this gives you an idea. Lower pressure in the West Pac, the air tends to move towards low pressure from high to low, and you get a pretty good easterly wind flow across the tropical Pacific, the equatorial region down here, and that helps to keep the warm water that is sort of banked up against the far western Pacific region at bay, and a bunch of other things. You have upwelling and downwelling going on, but the bottom line, when we see a positive SOI, especially in that 90-day there, and especially when it's above 5 or 7, then you typically see a La Nina pattern setting up. Right now it's a little bit more, leaning towards more neutral out here. Some light blues, a few just regular old normal colors, if you will, right in the middle of the spectrum. But it looks like, from stuff I've been reading and looking at on different message boards and whatnot, we're going to be maybe heading back towards that La Nina state, a little bit of an amplification of the colder anomaly pattern in the Pacific. And if you look at the Pacific as a whole, not just the equator down here, but everything else, including south of the equator, it's generally colder. And then you look over at the Atlantic side and you just should, automatically figure out, oh yeah, that is a signal of a busy Atlantic hurricane season. How busy? Well, I don't know. I don't know for sure. Nobody knows yet, but it looks like it's going to be really busy because this is cold. We'll put a big minus here. This is warm, so we put a plus here for favorability. In fact, the subtropics up here dipping down into the Gulf of Mexico, even from the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, all the way across. That's pretty warm. We were talking about a degree Celsius above average, and even more than that here towards the open central subtropical Atlantic. And then very curious, this band right here down near the equator, almost like an Atlantic El Nino trying to develop. And if this migrates north as the ITCZ comes north, that West African monsoon gets active. I don't know. I just think the signals are going to be there. They've been there, and they're going to continue to be there for a very busy season this year. 30 named storms again? Probably not. I hope not. That's just ridiculously too many. But 15 to 20 named storms, maybe 8, 9, 10 hurricanes, with as many as a half a dozen intense hurricanes or major hurricanes? Sure. I could totally see that with the pattern of the sea surface temperatures and how they are related to the averages going forward. All right, so actual sea surface temperatures, real quick. Mid-Atlantic states, too cold. My part of the world down here, southeast North Carolina, getting there. Still 68, 69, maybe 70, 71, depending on where you are in the Carolinas. But if you get in a boat and go right off to the Gulf Stream, much better. 79, 80, even 81 degrees here off the low country and Savannah and that area, Tybee Island. But you got to get in the Gulf Stream for that. Overall, water temperatures gradually warming as they're doing in the Gulf of Mexico. All of this region through here that I'm now highlighting with this black stroke mark, 26 Celsius or higher. So most of the Gulf of Mexico, there's 27. That's about 81 Fahrenheit. I mean, there's some 30 Celsius down here, 28, almost 29, near and around the Keys in that shallower water. And if we look at the anomalies real quick, back over here, yes, a good deal of the Gulf of Mexico is warmer than it should be. But, again, the Gulf's always going to be warm enough. And, so there's nothing really alarming about what we're seeing. Things are progressing pretty much where they should be. And it won't be long where everybody can go. I was talking to CJ, one of our supporters and all-around nice guy, anchor of our live coverage down here in Southwest Florida. And he said the water is, quote, warm enough for Floridians. And he says everybody knows what that means. Once it gets to that level, it's game on. It's warm. Warm enough. Still got to get a few degrees warmer for me. All right, so Ben Noll, our good buddy good friend and buddy, whatever, down in New Zealand. I've never met him in person, but I feel like I know him. I've had a few Zoom chats with him and YouTube live stuff last year on a Hurricane U session or two. Ben Noll tweets a bunch of nice dynamic maps that are very informative, and they have this theme also called thematic maps. And this map, the theme of it, is the North American Multi-Model Ensemble, the NMME, and the precipitation anomalies going into the summer. This was initialized just recently in the first part of May here, and these greens, as he's showing, indicate possible clusters of tracks. Maybe. I mean, that's one thing that you could infer from this. But it's not gospel. In other words, this isn't a forecast of where the tracks of cyclones will be this year, rather than this overall conglomerate of models suggesting clusters of above normal precip. And so we can just deduce from that, that looks like hurricane tracks over the coming hurricane season. So if we just kind of play this out, there's your West African monsoon, some tracks out to sea, more tracks out to sea over here, and then what is this business right there? Well, that is a pretty dense area relative to averages, about the 70th percentile, especially right through here. In other words, it's a pretty high concentration of anomalies, precip anomalies, in the Sunshine State and going up into the southeast, coming through the Greater Antilles. And I was doing some more research over on Storm 2K, which I'm going to talk about more in a minute for another reason. And people are really smart. Boy, you get together, you talk about what everybody knows, especially when it's nice and manageable and everybody's respectful to each other like they are there. You start to see patterns, and you can look back and say, well, what other years when you had precipitation anomalies in these areas, what other years look like that? And there's starting to be a pattern emerging that this resembles years where South Florida was hit by a decent hurricane. So I'm going to look into that more and maybe present that in the next week or two to give you some more background on that. But this is starting to become a little eye-opening. Okay, the models are kind of latching on to something, and we can look back and say, well, how did they do last year? You might be wondering that. Well, come on, Mark, you're showing this. What about past results? Well, this is the NMME for the same time period initialized this time last year. See right there? 2020. And a much denser area of tracks down in the main development region. This, kind of came to pass. We had a lot of tropical wave action. This did not. This was not quite as accurate, but this was. The Gulf of Mexico was very busy, as was the Caribbean. The overall wet signal to the western Atlantic was what was very prevalent last year, and that's what the NMME was suggesting. And lo and behold, that is generally what we had. I mean, we had Isaias that tracked up in here, and then we had all the activity over here. But it's, you look at like southwest Louisiana, and we had Laura in there, and this was showing generally average or slightly drier. So it's not perfect, but it gives you an idea that the overall consensus of the guidance is suggesting a busy Atlantic hurricane season, especially, and this is what I find to be most important, coming out of Africa with that West African monsoon, that change in wind direction where the instead of just easterly flow through here, you get it kind of reversing, this monsoon. It's a wind direction change seasonally, and that helps to create spin in the atmosphere because the easterlies are still blowing this way, and you get more vorticity because of that, and a pronounced area of moisture and other factors that could lead to a very busy hurricane season overall with some potential long track hurricanes. Anyhow, interesting to see. We really appreciate, at least I do, that Ben puts these maps out, lots of discussion about them, and we will see what happens going forward. But this helps us to see and bolster the support that you might want to be prepared. I mean, you got to be prepared every year, I would hope so. But this is a big warning sign, I think. So take it to heart. Don't let it upset you. But instead, like I say, it's a great thing to know in advance. Use it to your advantage, all right? All right, looking at lower 48 weather real quick. I thought this updated just a few minutes ago to include, yes, there it is. I thought there was an enhanced down in Texas. That's why I wanted to show you this. We're still in severe weather season, and as such, want to just make you aware of that. In kind of my neck of the woods, slight risk of some severe storms, hail and some wind damage, just the slightest possibility of a tornado, little sliver of northeast Texas up here. And then more concerning for me, because the people have been through so much down here recently, Del Rio, Hondo, San Antonio, that corridor, an enhanced risk, and if we zoom in on that via Twitter, and we can see what it's all about, that severe thunderstorms with very large hail, maybe softball size, in this area, coming up through, again, the region where you just had that, and it caused at least $1 billion in damage just the other day, a few days ago. The last couple of weeks, Del Rio through San Antonio, Laredo, yuck. So please be aware of that. Get your car inside, all that kind of stuff. Sorry, it's just the time of year, and these big hailstorms are a big problem. So pay attention to that. Going forward, let's see, that was day one. Yeah, so that's day one. This is day two tomorrow. That always confuses me. More just garden variety thunderstorms tomorrow, and by day three, not so much. Kind of a relaxation of the pattern. But if we go to the day 4 through 8 outlook, I think it's interesting, nothing showing up yet. However, they're discussing that the possibility of some troughiness coming into the west may induce some severe weather at the end of the next forecast period, heading out towards next weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and beyond. And that bodes well for me because I'm going back out there to meet up with one of our partners, Brent Lynn from the Virgin Islands. He and I are going to meet up in Dallas on Saturday. He's flying out Wednesday. We're going to spend the next week after that doing some weather balloon testing and also some bona fide, not really storm chasing, but this idea of the spike strip. I like that we set up in front of a supercell, if we can have any, and put a bunch of instrumentation in front of it. Mainly cameras, so we can see it from a lot of different angles, but also these nice little weather sensors from Kestrel that'll give us fairly decent sample rates about every 2 seconds of temperature, humidity, dew point, and pressure. And I think it'll just be a neat way to test some of the equipment. The same stuff that we use during hurricanes, we will use out there while we also test the weather balloon. And in fact, Brent has made his own version out of carbon fiber of our weather balloon called Herbie, the Hurricane Research Balloon. Herbie, H-U-R-R-B. And we're going to test that. It looks like a triangle, much, much lighter, carbon fiber based, very strong, but like 3 pounds lighter at least, so it requires less helium. And as we're out there days 4 through 8 and beyond, maybe we'll have some severe weather somewhere in this area. It could be down here. Who knows? We just try to avoid the thick tree area of the Deep South. That's the main thing. And if there is no severe weather, that's fine too. We have lots of other stuff to do while we're out there during that week, including interviews with people for the upcoming season of the Hurricane Highway series that I'm working on. Always something happening. All right, speaking of something happening, I am excited as heck to tell you that starting Saturday, May 15th, every day for the rest of the hurricane season, well, at least through mid-November or so, especially if things look like they're just going to kind of trail off and come to an end in November, before the traditional end of November 30th, I'm doing a new podcast available to all, as they say, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm using the Anchor platform, which is a Spotify service, to put this on Apple, Google, Spotify, whatever, and I don't know how to get it on Amazon just yet, for your Alexa, but we can work on that. Anyway, it's called Hurricane Season, the podcast, and it's going to be a daily, now brace yourselves, short, I know you're going to be loud, sure it's going to be short, but hear me out, a short, brief, kind of morning update as to what we're looking at in the world of the tropics, kind of tidbits for the day, but tropical tidbits is already taken, and I'm not going to even, that's Levi's thing at his website. So this is about the hurricane season. News of the day, just a quick update on what we're looking at, things to look for, with the knowledge and the promotion of this video. So I'll give you a morning briefing, tell you what we're looking at, and then always tease the fact that you can have this nice lengthy video to look forward to, and most of you do. I know some people like to have it more brief, but that's all right. That's what the podcast is for. The podcast is your morning brief, like a Cliff Notes, to start the day, leading into what we're going to be talking about in this video on a daily basis. Does that make sense? So that'll be available starting May the 15th. Subscribe to it once it's up. I'm hoping to do a trailer today or tomorrow to at least get that out there. And Hurricane Season, the podcast. It's coming soon. All right? All right. Don't forget also, on Patreon and HurricaneTrack Insider, I'm telling you, really neat stuff we're doing there. If you like this discussion and the videos that I do, you'll love HurricaneTrack Insider. It's got more content, including the live video coverage that we're famous for, and now weekly Zoom chats, exclusive interactive maps. I showed you that earlier. And all of this is done through that Patreon that you see there. What is Patreon, you might want to know? Well, it's a website and an app that lets fans like you on your side of the screen crowdfund projects like what I've got going on my side of the screen, while we put you in the action during our field work, right? We immerse you in it through our incredible live camera system. So download the Patreon app, search HurricaneTrack, and once you become a patron, we'll connect you to the Insider site. You'll have access to our growing community. We have almost 600 patrons, and still about 50 or 60 of our early day HurricaneTrack Premium Services supporters. And you guys can become a part of the innovation, the immersion of this video during our hurricane coverage and other high-impact weather events. Pretty neat, isn't it? Patreon, HurricaneTrack Insider. We're going to push it more and more because hurricane season's coming, and you can help crowdfund what we are doing. And speaking of that, let me get me out of the way so I don't hide the logo. I want to welcome storm2k.org as our first website patron. They just joined up at the $100 level, and I have been a member of Storm 2K since I think 2003. A wonderful message board. You know, the old forum days, that hasn't gone away. I love it. I love coming in here and seeing what's going on, the different topics, not just hurricanes in their Talking Tropics section, but, you know, preparedness, storm information, off-season stuff, winter weather, severe weather. And a lot of what I peruse each day are in some of these forum threads, and you can get a good idea from what people are talking about. Here's that NMME from a different perspective. Great site. I talked with David, the administrator, a great group of people that support Storm 2K through their crowdfunding using PayPal. And I am very excited to have Storm 2K as our official website patron. I guess that's the best way to call it. And again, let me move me out of the way. There you go. So thanks, David, to you and all the Storm 2K family out there. Your support of Storm 2K will allow us, through Patreon, to be supported and help us get through the year, because everything's going to be darned more expensive this year because of that darned pandemic. Gas prices are higher. Everything's going to be more expensive, so we need the help, and then we can do some amazing things with it and continue on what we do. All right? All right, well, that is it from me for today. Speaking of that podcast, real quick, I have actually written a script that I'm going to get good at to try to develop a format, because the goal of Hurricane Season, the podcast, there it is one more time to remind you, is to keep it short. It will be under 5 minutes. So take your bets as to how well that goes, right? Right. All right, now I'm done. Have a good rest of your Monday. As always, thank you for tuning in and giving me a part of your day. I appreciate it very much. I'm on Twitter, at HurricaneTrack, Facebook, YouTube. Subscribe. Hit the like button for me so people can enjoy this video. The algorithms will do their thing, and we can all do our thing in the world of hurricanes and other weather phenomenon. I'm Mark Sudduth. I'll talk to you again next week.